What if the biggest obstacle standing between you and the life you want isn't failure, but the few seconds before you decide to act? Think about it. Every opportunity, every dream, every meaningful change begins with a moment where fear whispers, wait. And most people listen, not because they're weak, not because they lack talent, but because the human brain is designed to protect comfort before it pursues possibility. The people we admire aren't fearless. They simply understand something the rest of the world often misses. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move before fear becomes the loudest voice in the room. The moment you hesitate, your mind starts building stories, creating excuses, and convincing you that tomorrow is a better day. Yet tomorrow rarely changes anything if today's mindset stays the same. Leadership doesn't begin when others choose to follow you. It begins in the private moments when you choose to lead yourself. Your purpose isn't discovered by overthinking every step. It's revealed by taking the first one. Every remarkable achievement, every breakthrough, every life-changing decision started with someone acting before they felt completely ready. So the question isn't whether fear will show up. It will. The real question is this: when fear knocks on the door of your potential, will it become your leader, or will it become the signal that you're about to do something that truly matters? Fear has an extraordinary ability to disguise itself. Most of us imagine fear as something dramatic, a racing heartbeat before stepping onto a stage, the nervousness before a difficult conversation, or the anxiety of making a life-changing decision. But that's not how fear usually shows up. More often, it arrives quietly. It sounds reasonable. It tells you to wait until you know a little more. It encourages you to prepare just a bit longer. It convinces you that another day, another week, or another month will somehow make the decision easier. And because it sounds logical, we mistake it for wisdom. The problem is that fear rarely asks you to quit. If it did, you'd recognize it immediately. Instead, it asks you to delay. It whispers, not today, and tomorrow. It whispers the exact same thing. Think about how many opportunities disappear not because people aren't talented enough, but because they hesitate just long enough for doubt to take control. Someone has an incredible idea for a business but spends years researching instead of building. Someone dreams of changing careers but keeps convincing themselves they need one more qualification before making the leap. Someone wants to tell another person how much they matter but waits until the perfect moment. A moment that never comes. Fear doesn't need to stop you forever. It only needs to stop you today. Our brains are remarkable survival machines. Long before they became engines of creativity, innovation, and leadership, they evolved to keep us alive. Thousands of years ago, caution was essential. Moving too quickly could mean danger. The unknown often carried real threats. So our brains became incredibly efficient at identifying risk before opportunities. That instinct still exists today, even though most of the fears we experience are no longer about survival. They're about judgment, rejection, embarrassment, failure, looking foolish in front of other people. The fascinating part is that your brain often reacts to social discomfort as though it's physical danger. It doesn't always distinguish between facing a predator and speaking up during a meeting. To your nervous system, uncertainty is something to avoid. That's why your body can feel tense before making a phone call or introducing yourself to someone new. Nothing dangerous is actually happening, yet every signal inside you says, stay where it's safe. But here's what separates people who grow from those who remain stuck. They don't wait for those signals to disappear. They learn to recognize them without obeying them. Action has a unique relationship with fear. We often believe confidence comes first and action follows. In reality, the sequence usually works the other way around. Action creates experience. Experience builds evidence. Evidence strengthens confidence. A child learning to ride a bicycle doesn't begin with confidence. They begin with uncertainty. They wobble. They fall. They try again. Every small success tells their brain something important. Maybe I can do this. Confidence isn't a prerequisite for action. It's the reward for repeated action. Somewhere along the way, many adults forget this lesson. We convince ourselves that successful people must have felt ready before they acted. We imagine entrepreneurs confidently launching companies, leaders confidently making difficult decisions, and innovators confidently sharing bold ideas. But if you listen carefully to their stories, you'll discover something different. Most of them acted while feeling uncertain. They simply refused to let uncertainty become paralysis. This is where leadership truly begins. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to move when the answers aren't completely visible yet. Every meaningful decision carries incomplete information. Every worthwhile opportunity involves some level of risk. If certainty were required before action, nothing significant would ever happen. Imagine standing at the edge of a dark forest with only a flashlight. The light reaches perhaps 10 feet ahead. It doesn't reveal the entire path. It doesn't show every turn or every obstacle waiting farther down the trail. If you demand visibility of the entire journey before taking the first step, you'll remain exactly where you are. But if you're willing to trust those first 10 feet, something incredible happens. Each step reveals another 10 feet. Progress creates clarity. Life works much the same way. People often ask themselves, what if I fail? It's an understandable question. But fear has trained us to ask only one side of the equation. A better question might be, what if I succeed? Or even more powerful, what happens if I never try? Regret has a way of becoming heavier over time than fear ever was. Fear is usually temporary. It peaks before action. Regret, however, can last for decades. It grows every time you wonder who you could have become if you had trusted yourself just a little sooner. The irony is that action doesn't eliminate fear because it guarantees success. Action reduces fear because it replaces imagination with reality. Before you act, your mind invents endless possibilities, most of them negative. After you act, you no longer have to imagine what might happen, Even if the outcome isn't perfect, you've gained something valuable, truth. And truth is far less exhausting than endless speculation. There is a profound difference between being afraid and being controlled by fear. Feeling fear is part of being human. Being controlled by it is a habit. Habits can change. Every time you choose action over hesitation, you're teaching your brain a new lesson. You're showing yourself that discomfort is survivable. You're proving that uncertainty isn't an emergency. You're creating a new identity, not someone who never feels fear, but someone who moves anyway. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The situations that once felt impossible become familiar. The conversations you once avoided become manageable. The opportunities that once seemed overwhelming become invitations instead of threats. Not because the world changed, but because your relationship with fear changed. The greatest transformation rarely happens in one bold, heroic moment. It happens through countless ordinary decisions where you choose movement over delay, purpose over comfort, and progress over perfection. Each decision may appear insignificant on its own, but together they become the foundation of a life defined not by fear, but by the courage to act before fear has the chance to take control. Purpose is one of the most misunderstood ideas in the modern world. Many people believe it is something they must discover before they begin. They imagine purpose as a destination waiting to be found, as though one day everything will suddenly make sense. They keep searching for a perfect answer to the question, what am I meant to do? They read books, watch videos, take personality tests, and wait for a moment of absolute clarity. But while they're searching for certainty, life quietly moves forward without them. What if purpose doesn't work that way? What if purpose isn't something you find sitting still? What if it's something that reveals itself only after you start moving? Think about every meaningful relationship you've ever had. You didn't know exactly where it would lead the moment you met that person. You couldn't predict the conversations, the challenges, the memories, or the lessons that would shape your life together. The relationship gained meaning because you invested time, took chances, and stayed present. Purpose follows a remarkably similar pattern. It grows through participation, not observation. This is one of the greatest traps of overthinking. We convince ourselves that if we think long enough, we'll eliminate uncertainty. We tell ourselves that one more plan, one more strategy, one more piece of advice will finally give us confidence. But thinking has limits. At some point, thinking becomes a substitute for living. There is an important difference between preparation and postponement. Preparation helps you move forward. Postponement simply feels productive while keeping you exactly where you are. Fear often disguises postponement as responsibility. It says, you're just being careful. But careful can slowly become comfortable, and comfortable can quietly become a prison. The world celebrates people who seem to have everything figured out. We look at successful entrepreneurs, respected leaders, artists, athletes, and innovators and assume they always knew what they were supposed to do. We see the finished story and forget about the uncertain beginning. We admire the destination without appreciating the confusion that came before it. Very few people begin their journey with complete clarity. Most begin with curiosity. Curiosity is often far more valuable than certainty because curiosity creates movement. It invites questions instead of demanding answers. It allows you to explore possibilities without needing immediate perfection. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean for the very first time. You can read every book ever written about swimming. You can study techniques, understand breathing patterns, and memorize every safety rule. But none of that teaches you what the water actually feels like. The only way to understand swimming is to step into the water. Purpose works exactly the same way. You cannot think your way into experience. You must experience your way into understanding. Every action teaches you something impossible to learn through theory alone. Every conversation reveals a perspective you didn't know existed. Every challenge introduces strengths you didn't realize you possessed. Every mistake uncovers wisdom that no classroom could ever provide. Movement creates information. When you stay still, your imagination fills the empty space with assumptions. When you move, reality replaces assumptions with facts. That's why so many people remain trapped. They expect certainty before action, when in reality, action is what creates certainty. Leadership has never been about having a flawless map. Leadership begins with the willingness to take the first step, even when the map is incomplete. The people who inspire us are rarely the ones who waited until every question was answered. They're the ones who understood that answers often appear during the journey, not before it. Consider how children approach the world. They don't worry about looking foolish every time they try something new. They build towers knowing they'll fall over. They ask endless questions without fearing embarrassment. They draw pictures without wondering whether they're masterpieces. They learn because they're willing to experiment. Somewhere along the way, adulthood teaches us a dangerous lesson. We begin believing that mistakes are evidence of inadequacy instead of evidence of growth. We become so concerned with avoiding failure that we accidentally avoid progress. But progress has always required imperfection. Every expert was once inexperienced. Every confident speaker once struggled to find the right words. Every successful business began as an uncertain idea. Every respected leader once made decisions without knowing exactly how they would turn out. Purpose doesn't arrive because you're perfect enough to deserve it. Purpose grows because you're brave enough to keep showing up. The remarkable thing about taking action is that it changes not only your circumstances, but your identity. Every time you choose movement over hesitation, you begin to see yourself differently. Instead of becoming someone who dreams, you become someone who does. Instead of defining yourself by intentions, you begin defining yourself by actions. Identity is shaped by repetition. If you repeatedly choose courage, you begin seeing yourself as courageous. If you repeatedly choose responsibility, you begin seeing yourself as responsible. If you repeatedly choose growth, you begin seeing yourself as someone capable of change. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly, one decision at a time. Purpose is rarely hidden in extraordinary moments. More often, it's revealed through ordinary consistency. It's found in the daily choice to improve your craft, to serve another person, to solve meaningful problems, and to contribute something valuable, even when nobody is watching. Many people believe purpose should always feel exciting, but purpose isn't constant excitement. Sometimes purpose feels like discipline. Sometimes it feels like responsibility. Sometimes it feels like doing the right thing when nobody applauds you for it. That's because purpose isn't built on emotion alone. It's built on commitment. Feelings come and go. Motivation rises and falls. Inspiration appears and disappears. But commitment continues even on the days when excitement is absent. This is why movement matters so much. Every step you take creates momentum. Momentum changes perspective. The farther you move, the more connections you begin to see. Opportunities that once seemed invisible suddenly appear. People enter your life who would never have met you if you had remained still. Skills develop that could never have been built through observation alone. Life has an interesting way of rewarding motion, not because movement guarantees success, but because movement creates possibilities. Standing still protects you from some failures, but it also protects you from nearly every meaningful opportunity. Purpose is not waiting for you at the finish line with a sign that says, "You finally found me." Purpose is quietly growing every time you choose to act with intention. Every time you learn from experience, every time you align your actions with your values instead of your fears. The people who eventually discover work that fulfills them, relationships that strengthen them, and lives that inspire others rarely begin with perfect clarity. They begin with a willingness to move, to explore, to learn, and to trust that each step forward will reveal something the previous step never could. They understand that the path becomes visible only to those who are willing to walk it. When people think about courage, they often imagine extraordinary moments. They picture someone standing in front of thousands of people delivering a powerful speech, an entrepreneur risking everything to start a company, or a firefighter running into a burning building. Those moments deserve admiration, but they can also create a dangerous misunderstanding. They make us believe courage only matters when the stakes are enormous. The truth is, the courage that transforms your life is rarely dramatic. It is usually quiet. It exists in the ordinary moments that almost no one notices. It's the decision to speak honestly when staying silent would be easier. It's raising your hand to ask a question even when you're afraid of looking uninformed. It's introducing yourself to someone new despite the possibility of rejection. It's admitting you made a mistake before someone else points it out. It's applying for the opportunity you don't feel fully qualified for. It's choosing to begin before you feel completely ready. These moments appear small, almost insignificant, yet they have extraordinary power because they shape something much deeper than your circumstances. They shape your identity. Every action you take sends a message to your brain about who you are. If you repeatedly avoid difficult conversations, your brain begins believing you're someone who avoids conflict. If you repeatedly stay inside your comfort zone, your brain starts believing you're someone who cannot handle uncertainty. But every time you choose courage, even in the smallest way, you interrupt that story. You begin writing a different one. Identity is not created by what you say about yourself. It is created by what you repeatedly do. This is why small acts of courage matter so much. They are votes for the person you are becoming. Imagine placing a single drop of water onto a stone. One drop changes nothing. A second drop changes nothing. Even 100 drops seem insignificant, but over time, thousands of drops reshape the surface of the rock. The transformation isn't dramatic in any single moment, yet the result becomes impossible to ignore. Human behavior works much the same way. We often underestimate what small decisions can accomplish because we're obsessed with immediate results. We want confidence instantly. We want success quickly. We want transformation overnight. But nature rarely works that way. Trees do not grow in a day. Muscles are not built after one workout. Trust isn't earned in one conversation. Great leadership isn't established through one inspiring speech. Everything meaningful grows through consistency. Resilience is no exception. Many people misunderstand resilience. They think resilient people don't experience fear, disappointment, criticism, or failure. In reality, resilient people experience all of those things. The difference is they have trained themselves not to let those experiences define them. Resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. And you build it exactly the same way you build physical strength. Imagine someone walking into a gym for the first time. They don't begin by lifting the heaviest weights in the room. If they tried, they would probably fail or get injured. Instead, they begin with manageable resistance. Day after day, week after week, their muscles adapt. The weight that once felt impossible eventually becomes routine. Emotional strength develops through the same principle. Every small challenge you willingly face becomes emotional training. Every uncomfortable conversation increases your capacity for future conversations. Every rejection teaches you that disappointment is survivable. Every mistake reminds you that imperfection is part of learning. Every risk expands what your mind considers possible. Without realizing it, you're strengthening muscles that cannot be seen but influence every decision you make. One of the greatest obstacles to courage is our obsession with perfection. We tell ourselves we'll act when we know enough, when we're skilled enough, when we're experienced enough, when we're confident enough. But perfection is a moving target. The closer you get, the farther away it seems. Fear loves perfection because perfection creates endless excuses for delay. Courage, on the other hand, embraces progress. Progress says, I'm willing to be a beginner. Progress says, I don't need every answer before taking the next step. Progress says, learning is more important than looking impressive. This mindset changes everything because it shifts your focus away from protecting your image and toward expanding your potential. Think about the people who inspire you most. Very few became extraordinary because they never failed. Most became extraordinary because they kept moving after failure. Every setback became information instead of identity. Every obstacle became education instead of evidence that they should quit. This ability isn't magic, it's practice. When you repeatedly choose courage in small situations, something remarkable happens. Your brain begins collecting evidence that discomfort does not equal danger. This matters because your mind is constantly searching for patterns. If every uncomfortable experience leads you to retreat, your brain concludes that retreat is the safest strategy. But if uncomfortable experiences repeatedly end with survival growth, or even success, your brain updates its expectations. What once felt terrifying eventually feels manageable. What once seemed impossible gradually becomes familiar. The situation may not have changed. You changed. There is an interesting paradox about fear. The more we avoid what frightens us, the larger it becomes in our imagination. The less we avoid it, the smaller it often becomes in reality. Think back to something that once intimidated you but now feels completely normal. Perhaps it was driving a car, speaking in front of a group, starting a new job, living away from home. The first experience probably felt overwhelming. Today, you barely think about it. What happened? The fear didn't disappear before you acted. It disappeared because you acted repeatedly. Repetition transformed uncertainty into familiarity. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A single heroic act of courage can be inspiring. 100 small acts of courage can change your life, because life is rarely determined by one defining moment. It is shaped by thousands of ordinary decisions made when nobody is watching. Leadership follows this same principle. People don't trust leaders because of one brilliant decision. They trust leaders because they consistently demonstrate integrity, honesty, responsibility, and courage over time. Trust accumulates exactly the way resilience does, one action at a time. Your future is not built only by the biggest decisions you make. It is built by the smallest decisions you repeat. Choosing to have the difficult conversation instead of avoiding it. Choosing to ask for feedback instead of protecting your ego. Choosing to admit uncertainty instead of pretending to know everything. Choosing to keep learning instead of pretending you've already arrived. Each decision appears insignificant on its own. Together, they become the architecture of character. Character is what allows people to remain steady when circumstances become unstable. It allows leaders to inspire confidence during uncertainty. It allows ordinary individuals to accomplish extraordinary things not because they possess extraordinary talent, but because they have developed extraordinary consistency. Every day presents countless opportunities to practice courage. Most of them will never make headlines. No audience will applaud. No celebration will follow. But those quiet moments matter more than you realize because they determine how you respond when life eventually presents larger challenges. When difficult seasons arrive, you won't suddenly become courageous. You'll rely on the courage you've been practicing all along. The confidence you need for tomorrow is built by the choices you make today. And every small decision to act despite uncertainty becomes another piece of evidence that fear may still have a voice, but it no longer has the authority to decide who you become or how far you're willing to go. Uncertainty makes most people uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of control. We like knowing what will happen next. We enjoy plans that unfold exactly as expected. We find comfort in guarantees because guarantees make us feel safe. But life has never promised certainty. In fact, if you look closely at every meaningful achievement in history, you'll notice something they all have in common. None of them began with complete certainty. Every breakthrough started with someone willing to move before they knew exactly how everything would turn out. This is one of the defining characteristics of great leadership. Leaders are not people who eliminate uncertainty. They are people who learn to make decisions in the presence of it. That distinction changes everything. Many people believe leaders possess extraordinary confidence. They imagine that successful entrepreneurs, respected executives, influential teachers, and inspiring visionaries somehow know the future better than everyone else. But they don't. They experience the same doubts. They ask the same difficult questions. They wonder whether they're making the right choice. The difference is they refuse to let uncertainty become an excuse for inaction. Leadership has never been about predicting every outcome. Leadership is about taking responsibility when outcomes cannot be predicted. Imagine a ship crossing the ocean. The captain cannot control the weather. The captain cannot eliminate storms. The captain cannot guarantee calm waters every single day, but the captain still has a responsibility to choose a direction, to guide the crew, and to keep moving toward the destination. Waiting for perfect weather would mean remaining in the harbor forever. Many people are living exactly that way. They stay safely anchored, convincing themselves they're simply waiting for the right conditions. I'll start when the economy improves. I'll speak up when I know more. I'll apply when I feel qualified. I'll launch my idea when everything is ready. The list never ends because uncertainty never disappears. There will always be another reason to postpone action if certainty becomes your requirement. Comfort has a fascinating way of disguising itself as wisdom. It tells you that staying where you are is the responsible choice. It convinces you that avoiding risk is the same as avoiding failure. But avoiding risk often means avoiding growth. Growth has never existed inside the boundaries of complete comfort. Think about every skill you've ever developed: learning to drive, learning a language, starting a new career, building meaningful relationships, leading a team. None of these experiences felt comfortable in the beginning. Discomfort wasn't evidence you were doing something wrong. Discomfort was evidence you were expanding. This is one of the most misunderstood signals our minds produce. We often interpret discomfort as danger. In reality, discomfort frequently signals development. Muscles become stronger by experiencing resistance. Minds become wiser by encountering challenges. Character becomes stronger by facing adversity. Without resistance, there is no growth. Without uncertainty, there is no discovery. Without stepping beyond what feels familiar, there is no transformation. The comfort zone isn't a bad place. It's simply a terrible place to stay forever. Comfort is valuable for rest. It is valuable for recovery. It is valuable for reflection. But comfort was never designed to become a permanent address. Imagine planting a seed inside a glass box where nothing ever changes. No wind, no rain, no changing seasons, no challenge. It might appear protected, but protection alone cannot produce growth. Life develops through interaction with the environment. Strength develops through adaptation. Human beings are no different. Every challenge asks you an important question. Will you become smaller to match the challenge, or will you grow large enough to overcome it? That choice defines leadership. Leadership begins long before anyone gives you a title. Some people spend years waiting to become leaders because they believe leadership starts with authority, but leadership begins the moment you choose responsibility over convenience. Responsibility to keep learning. Responsibility to keep improving. Responsibility to make difficult decisions even when easier options exist. The most respected leaders rarely have perfect information. Instead, they develop something far more valuable. They develop judgment. Judgment isn't created by avoiding mistakes. It's created by learning from them. Every decision teaches something. Successful decisions build confidence. Unsuccessful decisions build wisdom. Both are valuable. People who fear making mistakes often avoid making decisions altogether. Ironically, indecision can become the greatest mistake of all, because while you're refusing to choose, time continues moving, opportunities continue passing, potential continues waiting. One of the greatest myths about successful people is that they avoided failure. History tells a different story. Nearly every remarkable leader experienced setbacks, criticism, rejection, and moments when the future looked uncertain. What separated them wasn't flawless execution. It was consistent action. They understood something many people forget. Progress is impossible without risk. Not reckless risk, purposeful risk, the kind of risk that aligns with your values, the kind of risk that serves a meaningful goal, the kind of risk that stretches your abilities instead of satisfying your ego. There's an important difference between gambling and courageous leadership. Gambling ignores responsibility. Leadership embraces it. A leader doesn't pretend uncertainty doesn't exist. A leader acknowledges uncertainty while refusing to surrender to it. Imagine climbing a mountain. From the bottom, the summit may disappear behind clouds. You cannot see every rock. You cannot predict every obstacle. You cannot guarantee perfect conditions. But climbers don't demand complete visibility before taking the first step. They trust the path enough to begin. Each step reveals the next section of the climb. Life often works exactly the same way. You don't receive clarity before movement. You receive clarity because of movement. Many people spend years asking themselves what the perfect decision is. Perhaps a better question is, which decision allows me to keep growing? Growth rarely follows perfection. Growth follows participation. The remarkable thing about courage is that it becomes easier each time you practice it. Not because uncertainty disappears, because your relationship with uncertainty changes. Instead of seeing the unknown as an enemy, you begin seeing it as a teacher. Every unfamiliar experience becomes an opportunity to discover new strengths. Every unexpected obstacle becomes a chance to become more adaptable. Every difficult decision becomes another opportunity to strengthen your character. The future belongs to people willing to learn faster than circumstances change. That requires humility. It requires curiosity. Most importantly, it requires action. The world is changing faster than ever. Technology evolves, industries transform, careers shift. Entire ways of working appear and disappear within a few years. In such a world, certainty has become even more temporary. Adaptability has become far more valuable than predictability. The leaders who thrive are not necessarily those with the highest intelligence. They're often the ones most willing to learn, adjust, and move despite uncertainty. Because they understand a timeless truth. You cannot control every circumstance. You cannot predict every outcome. You cannot remove every obstacle from your path, but you can control your willingness to keep taking the next meaningful step. And every step beyond comfort expands not only your capabilities, but also your understanding of who you are capable of becoming, revealing strengths that could never have emerged if you had remained in the familiar safety of what you already knew. There is a moment that exists before every meaningful achievement. It is not the moment of success. It is not the moment of recognition. It is not the moment when the world applauds. It is the moment when someone chooses to act despite uncertainty. That single decision, often invisible to everyone else, creates something incredibly powerful. It creates momentum. Momentum is one of the most underestimated forces in human behavior. We often think motivation is what moves people forward. We wait until we feel inspired. We wait until our emotions align with our goals. We wait until confidence arrives. But motivation is unreliable. Some days it shows up. Some days it doesn't. If your progress depends on how you feel, your progress will always be inconsistent. Momentum works differently. Momentum doesn't ask whether you feel ready. Momentum grows because you move. Think about pushing a large boulder resting at the bottom of a hill. The first push feels almost impossible. It barely moves. Every muscle strains. Every part of you wants to stop because the effort seems greater than the reward. But if you continue pushing, something changes. The resistance begins to decrease. The boulder starts rolling. Suddenly, the same force that once held it still begins helping it move. Life often follows the same pattern. The hardest step is rarely the 100th. It's the first conversation, the first application, the first workout, the first chapter, the first business idea, the first apology, the first act of courage. Everything that follows becomes easier because movement creates momentum. Fear understands this. That's why fear tries so hard to stop you before you begin. Fear knows that once you take the first step, its influence starts to weaken. It loses the advantage of uncertainty because now you have experience, you have evidence, you have proof that action is possible. This is why hesitation can become so dangerous. Every day you postpone an important decision, your imagination continues creating reasons not to move. The opportunity appears larger, the challenge seems more intimidating. The consequences feel more severe than they probably are. But once you begin, reality replaces imagination. Reality is almost always easier to manage than the stories fear invents. There is something remarkable about human beings. We become what we repeatedly experience. If you repeatedly experience hesitation, hesitation becomes familiar. If you repeatedly experience action, action becomes familiar. Confidence is built exactly this way. Many people believe confidence is a personality trait. They assume some people are naturally confident while others simply aren't. But confidence is much more practical than that. Confidence is accumulated evidence. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes another piece of evidence. Every challenge you face becomes another reminder of your capability. Every obstacle you overcome becomes another reason to trust yourself. Trust is not built only between people. It is also built within yourself. When you constantly delay action, you slowly teach yourself that your intentions cannot be trusted. You say you'll begin tomorrow. Tomorrow arrives. Nothing changes. You promise yourself next week. Next week passes, the cycle repeats. Without realizing it, you're damaging the most important relationship you'll ever have, the relationship between your words and your actions. Self-confidence grows when those two things align. When you say you'll do something and then you do it, regardless of how small the task may be, your brain learns something incredibly important. I can depend on myself. That belief changes everything. Because once you trust yourself, fear begins losing its authority. Fear still exists, but it no longer determines your decisions. One of the most inspiring qualities of exceptional leaders is not that they never experience doubt. It's that they continue honoring their commitments despite doubt. People follow leaders who demonstrate consistency, not perfection. Consistency. Imagine working with someone who always keeps their word, someone who arrives when they say they will, someone who follows through on responsibilities, someone who remains calm during challenges. Over time, trust naturally develops. Now imagine becoming that person for yourself. Imagine trusting your own decisions, trusting your discipline, trusting your resilience, trusting your ability to adapt. That level of self-belief doesn't appear overnight. It grows through momentum. One fulfilled commitment leads to another. One courageous decision leads to another. One meaningful action inspires the next. Eventually, what once required extraordinary effort becomes part of your identity. This is how transformation happens, not through one dramatic breakthrough, through countless ordinary victories. Many people underestimate small wins because they compare them to enormous goals. But small wins are what make enormous goals possible. A marathon is completed one step at a time. A book is written one page at a time. A company is built one decision at a time. A meaningful life is created one intentional action at a time. Every small victory tells your brain, progress is happening. Progress creates hope. Hope fuels persistence. Persistence creates results. Results strengthen confidence. Confidence encourages more action. And the cycle continues. This is positive momentum. The opposite is also true. Avoidance creates more avoidance. Fear creates more fear. Excuses create more excuses. The longer you wait, the heavier action feels. That's why beginning matters so much. Not because the first step solves everything, because the first step changes everything, it changes your direction. Direction is always more important than speed. You can move slowly and still arrive somewhere meaningful if you're heading in the right direction. But standing still, no matter how safe it feels, cannot take you anywhere new. Purpose requires movement. Growth requires movement. Leadership requires movement. There will always be reasons to delay. The economy may not be perfect. Your skills may not feel complete. Your confidence may not feel strong enough. Someone else may seem more talented. The timing may never feel ideal. If you wait for ideal conditions, you'll spend your life preparing for opportunities instead of living them. The remarkable thing about action is that it changes more than your external circumstances. It changes how you see yourself. Each courageous decision becomes evidence that you're capable of more than you previously believed. Your comfort zone expands. Your resilience deepens. Your perspective broadens. The person who once feared speaking in public eventually mentors others. The person who once doubted starting a business eventually creates jobs for hundreds of people. The person who once questioned their own abilities eventually inspires confidence in everyone around them. Transformation always begins internally before it becomes visible externally. Long before anyone notices your success, your mindset has already changed. Your habits have already changed. Your standards have already changed. Your identity has already changed. People often admire the final chapter of someone's story while overlooking the thousands of invisible choices that made it possible. Every meaningful accomplishment is built upon moments that seemed insignificant at the time. Choosing discipline instead of distraction. Choosing responsibility instead of excuses. Choosing action instead of endless planning. Choosing purpose instead of comfort. Those decisions rarely make headlines. No audience applauds them. No celebration follows. Yet they quietly shape the future. The future is never created all at once. It is created one decision at a time. One action becomes two. Two become 10. 10 become habits. Habits become character. Character becomes leadership. Leadership creates influence. And influence has the power to change not only your own life, but the lives of countless others. Proving that the simple decision to act before fear takes control is never just about achieving a goal. It is about becoming the kind of person whose courage inspires others to believe that they, too, are capable of taking the first step toward a future they once thought was beyond their reach.